Emisión.net.
Hello again and welcome to Letter from England, broadcasting for the Spanish Evangelical Alliance and AC Press. This week's headline, Power Corrupts and Institutionalized Power Can Corrupt Institutions, is not so much about the developing spat between the Independent Civic Observatory, a watchdog created by a group of evangelicals to study and make public its findings on religious liberty, or the lack of it, and other issues of interest in society, on the one hand, and the Federation of Evangelical Organizations, the Protestant institution officially recognized by the government for dealings between the state and Protestants, on the other. I say it's not so much about the spat or that is developing between those two groups, but the principles behind the latest controversy. However, first we must set the scene. Last month, the Observatory, which is linked to the Spanish Evangelical Alliance, presented to the press its first report on religious liberty and equality and freedom of speech in Spain, 2006. The aim of the Observatory is to produce an annual report on a topical issue, but the Observatory has clarified that its views do not necessarily represent those of the Alliance, as a Federation statement had implied. Indeed, next year's report will apparently be on the state of the health service, and the Evangelical Alliance does not have an official policy on that. The Observatory is keen to see more evangelicals involved in political and social areas of national life. And in a statement, it replied to Federation comments by saying that the report was not an analysis merely of the situation in the evangelical community, but in society at large. The Federation argues that much of the report covers the same ground as Protestants have been campaigning on for the last 50 years, and ignores much in the report which is new, such as the call for the Spanish government to include the defence of religious freedom internationally, for instance in a country like Cyprus, in its human rights policy. The report also tackles the new citizen subject to be taught in state schools, as well as its concern that the Socialist Party is seeking to impose a uniform set of moral values on society. It also takes a very different stance on the charitable tax contributions debate. Instead of money going straight to organisations such as the Federation, if the legislation is passed, they argue for individuals to be given more incentive to give money to the charities of their choosing, in a system rather akin to the gift aid option which operates in the UK. However, what has most angered the Federation is the reference to dangerous federations, although the report actually speaks of the potential dangers of dominant institutions. The Observatory is particularly concerned that if a group of federations start receiving money from the government to strengthen their own institution, as the current policy indicates, this could lead to a powerful hierarchy which wouldn't necessarily be representative of the people it was supposed to be helping. Rather, the Observatory would like to see government aid going straight to the groups which are actually carrying out social action in the name of their faith, which of course is an eminently Protestant concept, the local project rather than the hierarchical institution. The Federation feels that it has lost the confidence of the Observatory, but the Observatory replies that it continues to respect the Federation's role as negotiator with the government, but that its own role covers broader issues affecting the whole of society. It says it operates in the tradition of international Protestant thought, whereby people offer their views to democratic institutions, from national governments through political parties to any institution which works in society. So what are the principles behind this disagreement? Well, the Observatory is concerned that legislation which institutionalizes government aid to representative groups such as the Federation of Evangelical Organizations actually perpetuates a bad model, a model which the Roman Catholic Church has in Spain, whereby it's funded directly or indirectly to a large extent, nay, to a huge extent, by the state. Now, of course, in the case of Protestants being a much smaller group, there wouldn't be so much money, but the principle is the same. And the institution which receives the money becomes beholden to the government in a much tighter respect. Much better, says the Observatory, that Christians are able to give to charities of their choice and have tax incentives to do so, rather than the government deciding where the money should go. The problem is that the Federation is being sucked into or is even willingly going into a government line or following a government policy whereby faith-based institutions representative of faith groups, are actually being paid in effect by the government to do their job, and that's a dangerous development. Well, thank you for listening to Letter from England, broadcasting on emission.net. Goodbye for now.
Emisión.net